Thank you and good afternoon. At least here on the East Coast, we really appreciate everyone joining us for what is our final CPG Speak session of 2021. These sessions allow our industry to come together to learn important lessons from company leaders. They've been a tremendous hit during the pandemic, and we're pleased to be able to provide you with this content. We're thankful to Salesforce and Thomas, Large & Singer, today's session sponsors. And we also want to thank the American Cleaning Institute for partnering with us for today's program. I'm pleased to be joined today by Linda Rendle, CEO of the Clorox Company and incoming Vice Chair of the Consumer Brands Association, and also Stacey Grier, Senior Vice President and Chief Marketing and Strategy Officer for Clorox. Today, Linda, Stacey, and I will reflect on the past 2 years and the impact they've had on employee safety, product demand, and evolving consumer expectations. We'll then take a look to the future and see how Clorox is investing long-term value for their stakeholders. Linda and Stacey, thanks for joining us.
Great to be here. Thanks for having us, Jeff.
Linda, let's start with you. Obviously, a long tenure in the consumer packaged goods industry, starting with Procter & Gamble years ago. Tell us a little bit about your career path and how you got to this great opportunity at Clorox.
Yeah, I think it was well beyond my start at Procter. I actually grew up in the industry. My dad worked for P&G for over 40 years. So I grew up doing store resets and facing out product as a little kid. And then I started my career with P&G and spent time in sales there. And I came over to Clorox and have been here for 19 years. And I've had a lot of roles across many different things, and mainly in sales, a lot in supply chain and innovation. And then later in my career as a general manager. And, you know, some of the insights I would just have and have people think about, the thing I am most grateful for in my career is the fact that I took risks and I did different things. I don't have a traditional career path that looked one way. And I was always willing to raise my hand and take that big assignment that somebody might not have seen the value in. And it taught me so much. And I firmly believe it's the reason I'm CEO of the company today. And then the last insight I'd have is no matter what, always lead through your values. And that's a lesson that I've returned to time and time again. It's something we'll talk about and how we manage through the pandemic. But leading with your values, having the courage to speak the truth is always something that will do you well in the jobs that you're in today and set you up to continue to grow in the future.
Those are great insights. Thank you for that. I assume the supply chain experience that you had is also coming in pretty handy right about now.
Okay, that's for sure. Well, I don't know. You can ask my supply chain lead. Maybe he doesn't agree.
Stacey, similar question to you about your background. You came over to Clorox in 2016, some really good experience on the agency side. Tell us a little bit more about your previous experiences.
Well, like Linda, I started my career where my family came from. My father owned an advertising agency, and I went into the creative agency as I came out of school, leading strategy. And I really valued the experience for many things, but it gave me a very broad view of businesses. So I worked on everything from personal care and food to alcoholic beverages and fashion. And I would say I took a couple of big lessons out of that. The first was that most business problems are actually human challenges at their core. And if you can solve the human problem, you can usually solve the business problem. And I think that's across industries. So I have really taken that to heart. And it is one of the reasons I think being human-centered can solve a lot of our problems. I think the second is, like Linda, I didn't take a traditional career path. What I did was have a voracious appetite to learn. And learning actually is where growth comes from. And I actually found that guided my career path much, much more so than jobs I was seeking. Where could I grow and learn and be with people I could learn from?
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. We all meet these people in our careers who are so excited to get here. They have it all planned out.
That's right.
Rather than getting everything out of the experience they're having at the moment, right? Maximizing that experience and letting everything else kind of take care of itself, which it will. If you stay focused, you deliver good results. So couldn't agree with you more. Let's jump into what the company has gone through over the past couple of years. Obviously, the pandemic caused disruptions across the CPG industry, but I can't think of a company that was more a face of the pandemic, particularly the outset when everybody in America was looking for some of what Clorox had to offer. Let's start with what happened during the pandemic. Linda, you come in as a new CEO in the middle of a pandemic, as if you didn't have enough on your plate. The company didn't have enough on its plate. please walk us through kind of how you navigated the process coming in, what the early days were like. Do we have all the wipes we need now? That's what everyone's wondering.
Yeah, what a time to become CEO, but also an enormous blessing at the same time, because I think what the pandemic highlighted for us was something we already knew to be the case, is that we are central to how people keep themselves healthy and well, and also how they take care of themselves at home, whether that be through eating at home or taking care of their trash, et cetera. So we always knew that was important, but the pandemic put that in front and center for us. And we turned back to those lessons at the very beginning and said, what are we going to do no matter what decision we have to make when we're dealing with 500% increases in demand? What do we need to focus on? And the very first thing was keeping our people safe and well so that they could make products and deliver products for other people. And that was a core focus for us. And I'm proud to say that we have the best recorded safety rate last year than we ever have as a company during a time when we produce more product than we ever have before. And that demonstrates that core need to keep people safe. And then the second thing was, thinking about putting people at the center. So of course, part of that is keeping our people safe, but in terms of what we needed to deliver for consumers around the world, we prioritized getting as much supply as we possibly could. And we did that knowing we would have to take an increase in cost, that we would have to think about how we work differently. But that was always our goal, get to the place where we could meet demand as fast as we possibly could. And I'm proud to say now, we are making currently twice the amount of wipes that we made pre-pandemic right now, and we are able to meet demand. And I think that has gone a long way to really helping people feel safe during a time with so much uncertainty.
As you and I have discussed, the pandemic's not over, right? It's still with us. We're seeing cases rise across the US right now. What aspects, you mentioned going back to the very beginning, you focused on keeping people safe, you focused on your people. What are you focused on right now?
So that stays the number one priority, is keeping our people safe and putting people at the center and serving consumers. But what we're really focused on right now is we worked completely differently over the last almost 2 years now. And we don't want to lose that. We don't want to lose that focus on speed. We don't want to lose that focus on people. And although things have been core to us, we used to operate in timelines when we could have a leadership meeting once a month and get business done. Now we meet daily and we're moving so much quicker. And that's what we're focused on right now. How do we maintain that safety? How do we maintain ensuring that we can meet the demand from our consumers? But how can we move so much faster? I think what's clear, and you said it, Jeff, the pandemic is not over, very unfortunately, but I think the world has changed for good. And Stacey said something yesterday that was really compelling as we were talking about this. She said, we can't look backwards. We have to be looking forwards. And that is about forward motion and momentum, and not thinking about returning to something, but going forward to something new. And I think that's incredibly well said.
Stacey, I'll turn to you. One part of or a big part of Clorox is the Ignite strategy. Linda mentioned speed, the focus on people. Talk to us a little bit about the key components of this strategy. I've got to imagine that those things are baked in.
Yeah, we were very lucky. We had built Ignite really for disruption. We could never have imagined the amount of disruption it would face very quickly, but we had really identified some key megatrends and disruptors, and those came to fruition and accelerated under COVID. So our strategy became more relevant. Really, at its core, it's about innovating and innovating broadly. Obviously, that means product, but innovating how we partner with retailers, innovating how we connect with external partners, innovating how we create the financial fuel to run our businesses. It's really about innovating the way we think about bringing our commitment to sustainability to life in our businesses. So the core of Ignite is about innovation and innovating ourselves as much as the innovations we bring to the world. Linda just talked about it. It was really about reimagining how we work. And so when COVID came, we accelerated that work tremendously. We were also able, because Ignite put people at the center, to give that work more meaning and direction through a crisis that people were having all over the world, in a shared experience that was so monumental that it's hard to put your head around. So really, that was what Ignite did for us. We were just so fortunate to have it at that moment in time.
I often hear the discussion around innovation, And obviously it's what our industry has to do to keep up with the consumer. At the same time, there's the realities of demand, unlike anything we've seen before, sustained demand, even to this point, year over year, up about 10%. We've got supply chain issues across the board. We've got inflation. How do you focus on innovation in an environment like that?
I think there's,
Yep.
go ahead, Linda.
Please, Stacy. No, okay. We're the two polite people here. So, I think what it is for us, if you believe in your values, and what we said is we believe in the value of putting people at the center, then the thing we must do is evolve with them. So innovation becomes just as important, right? Because to Stacy's good point, everyone was going through this monumental change. And we needed to make sure we were moving with them and we were delivering them products and experiences that met that need. So that helped us prioritize innovation. And then we did some very practical things. We actually walled off innovation resources. And we said, we are going to dedicate these people to thinking about the problems of tomorrow. And that really helped, because I think if we had asked everyone in our company to do a little bit of everything, we wouldn't have been able to get to the point we are today, where we have a robust innovation pipeline that we're really excited about and really excited to share with consumers over the coming months.
Stacey, anything you want to add to that?
No, she's got it.
I love the idea, though, of walling this off, of basically saying for certain individuals, the pandemic isn't going to be what you're worrying about. You're worrying about the future. You're worrying about what those other opportunities are. It makes great sense. A hallmark, obviously, of Clorox is the focus on purpose. Very much a purpose-driven company. You've been outspoken about that for a long time. Talk to us a little bit, Stacey, I'll turn to you, a little bit about what purpose means for the company.
Yeah. So really, the pandemic revealed our authentic purpose to us. While we had always been a very values-based company and we certainly had brand purposes, we didn't actually have an articulated company purpose. And as we were going through the beginning of the pandemic, it became so clear what our purpose was that all we had to do was put words to it. We were already living it. All we had to do was put the words to it. And I remember sitting at the town hall when Linda revealed those words to people, and the spark that we saw in the organization of, yes, that's it. That's why I'm doing this. So from our teammates who were working as hard as they could be working, particularly at our plants, really put words to the reason they were working that hard. It became part of the way we thought about our talent. How can we help people be well and thrive every single day, which is our purpose? How can we really help them in that? It became core to the acceleration of I&D at the company. So our inclusion and diversity efforts really were accelerated because that was a part of helping people be well and thrive every single day. So I think it has been such a strong part of us because it kind of existed in our hearts and souls. We were certainly a health and wellness company, but COVID showed us what we really were. And it wasn't words on a page. It was what we were already living. And then we put words to it. And that has really changed the company and brought us all together and united us in ways that I didn't even think possible when you read about the concept of purpose.
Are there some examples you can point to in terms of how the company or how some of the specific brands bring that purpose focus to life?
Absolutely. So as a company, we have a company purpose, but what consumers primarily see are our brand purposes. So Clorox's brand purpose is to champion a healthy world where people thrive. And we really brought that to life and made decisions on that. So it gave us a bias towards taking care of healthcare. So we made decisions to prioritize supply to healthcare when it was important that we do that. So our brand purposes did. Our company purpose really unifies our purposes. So they all nest under Be Well and Thrive, but they each individually come to life for consumers in different ways. I think primarily our corporate purpose comes to life for our employees and our board and our investors.
That's great. So when we look forward, obviously consumers are going to be probably a little bit different going forward. There have been some fundamental changes that the pandemic has brought about. As Linda said, the line that you used with us yesterday, the future isn't about looking back. And yet that's what so many people are inclined to do. When do we get back to normal? When do we get back to how it used to be? Well, I think your point of view would be, we're not going to. This is going to be
That's
different in several ways. Talk to us a little bit about how you're thinking about the consumer and adapting to some of their needs and perhaps some of the opportunities that creates for Clorox.
Yeah. So as Linda said, we understand that people are in journeys towards goals, and we know that the best way to create a relationship with them is to help them do that. And that means getting really close to them. It means our ability to understand and know them. So when we launched Ignite, one of our goals was to personalize for people, and that meant knowing people. So we declared we want to know 100 million people by 2025. I'm extremely proud to say we've crossed the halfway mark to that goal. Part of it is because people really turned to us during the pandemic, and we were able to create tremendous value. We did things like give people education around bleach, for which they gave us their email addresses because they wanted to learn more about that. So we've actually created a lot of value for people and furthered that relationship. But it's really about being able to personalize on this journey, because as the world becomes more unpredictable, I think personalization becomes more important to people. They want to know that you know something about them and that you're trying to help them get to the next step. So that's one of the pieces that we're thinking about as we think about consumers, our ability to pivot around their personalized needs. We're also really working on domains, which are the need states that people have, rather than thinking about categories. So instead of wiping away the lines that categories draw, what do people really need? It goes back to what Linda was saying about innovation. How can we be responsive to the changing needs of consumers that are really in reaction to the pandemic and so much more? Inflation, all of the things that people are now facing that they didn't face 10 years ago.
Linda, anything you'd add about the changing consumer?
I think I'll go back to the point you made, Jeff. This isn't over. And I think Stacey just made a really important point about what consumers are going to be facing in things like inflation. Consumers haven't faced it all yet. We haven't faced it all as people. We still have impacts that are going to happen. And so it's going to require us to continue to listen to them, to continue to evolve as an industry. We don't know, unfortunately, what COVID has to offer us coming up here, or, hopefully we won't be facing another pandemic different than COVID, but the science would tell you we will. And so I think that's the point that I would want to make about the consumer. I think they're going to move faster. There's going to be more change, and they are not done experiencing the impacts from this pandemic yet. And we're going to have to be mindful of that. We're going to have to be mindful of that as an industry, as we innovate, as we ensure we meet their needs every step of the way. But I think we have to keep returning to the point we are not through this yet.
Well, to that point, and building on that, it's a remarkable when we look back over the 20 plus months now of COVID and how we operated in March and April of 2020, perhaps different than how we operated in September and then now into this year. In fact, it's all kind of a blur when you look back on it. But if you think back at those early days, a lot of people were wiping down the groceries when they came in the house. They needed a Clorox wipe for every aspect of life. How true is that today? How do you see people settling into perhaps a new normal with some of your key products?
Yeah, I think what's really good is we know a lot more about COVID, how it's transmitted, and certainly we know a lot about cold and flu as we head into that season coming up here now. And so I think what consumers were doing at the beginning is completely rational. We didn't know. And so they were taking the utmost precautions, including doing things like wiping down their groceries. Now we know more about the pandemic. And so we're able to, again, help them understand how we believe our products are best used to keep them well, when disinfecting is required, when regular cleaning is required, the fact that you have to wash your hands and wear a mask and hopefully get vaccinated. So I think the more information that consumers and we have is better. But what we still continue to see is cleaning and disinfecting is an important part of the routine. We know that viruses and bugs are transmitted on surfaces. We've learned that COVID is primarily transmitted through the air, but can be transmitted by surfaces. So people are taking those steps to keep them well. And we certainly know cold and flu and how long it can live on surfaces. People are thinking about that as we head up. So we see cleaning and disinfecting behavior continuing to persist. We expect that to continue for the foreseeable future. because I think people realize there are more pathogens around them that unfortunately can make them unwell, and unfortunately have cost too many millions of people their lives. So, we continue to see consumers care about that. I think really importantly too, for our whole portfolio, and for, I know everybody who's probably listening to this, consumer behavior has changed in other ways that are going to impact our brands. Digital adoption has been incredible during this period of time. People who had never ordered groceries online, who had never had something shipped to their home in our categories, had to turn to that. And we're seeing that behavior be very, very sticky. So the way that people not only use products through trends, but also the way they acquire them is different. And that, we believe, is here to stay. And we'll be at our e-commerce goals that we had set for 2025 this year, if that gives you perspective how quickly that curve has moved forward for us.
That's great. We're going to dig into that topic a little bit more here in a minute. Before we get to there, let me just remind everybody who's listening in that we look forward to getting to your questions. So if you want to go to the Q&A function here within Zoom, go ahead and submit some questions. We'll get to those in a couple minutes. That's always one of the more enjoyable parts of the session. Let's get into that last section, talk about kind of how stakeholders, consumers, customers, others are just expecting some different things from your company and many others in our industry today than perhaps they were in the past. So I'd like to spend a few minutes digging in on that. Stacey, I'll start with you. You oversee strategy for the company. Can you highlight some of the key areas of emphasis in terms of what stakeholders are expecting today that is a bit different than what they did, let's say 3, 4, 5 years ago?
One of the things we're really focused on is how to create more dynamic strategy. So we are a strategy-led company and have historically been a strategy-led company, which can often mean going slow. We're really working hard to make our strategies more dynamic, really putting in milestones and key performance indicators that start to tell us where we're on and where we're off with strategy. So we are in more constant refinement of strategy rather than doing a big strategy project and putting it on a shelf and revisiting it again in 4 to 5 years. I think that is the real big change that we've seen under COVID is how do we keep these business more dynamic, more responsive to the environment, and really stay on top of what's working for us and what's not working for us so we can change in the moment.
Linda, to you, obviously, when you talk about what customers, consumers, other stakeholders are expecting, a lot of it's about ESG. We see that across not just our industry, but broader. It's hard to focus on all those things simultaneously. I'm sure you've got a foothold in each, but when it comes to ESG from a Clorox perspective, where do you really focus your time?
Yeah, it starts with our purpose. So as Stacey said, our corporate purpose is to champion people to be well and thrive every single day. Well, people can't be well and thrive if we don't have a healthy planet, if we don't have a healthy social structure, and certainly if companies aren't run properly from a governance perspective. So with that, we have had a long focus on ESG. This is not something, that's a fad or recent for us. This has been something we've been doing for many years. But what we realized in our recent strategy period, and the pandemic has only strengthened the resolve that we have around this, it has to be part of our every single day business processes and strategies. It cannot be something sitting off to the side in a center of excellence that's run by a few people. Every single person in our company has to be focused on our ESG metrics and goals. That is required for us to make the type of impact that we want to make. And if we think about the progress we've made, it's been strong because we've done that. So each one of our business units, for example, are in charge of having a 3-year sustainability plan. They have to build that into their product plan to understand where they can make impact. We just set net zero targets for 2050. And each one of the businesses right now is going through to understand exactly what the impact in their supply chain is and what are the choices they must make in order to deliver that. And then, of course, as we think about the S in ESG with social, we have to be committed to having a society that respects people, that lifts up diversity, that is committed to truly making everybody able to be their best selves and do their best work. And that's been something we've been long committed to, but we've recognized during this time that we have to do even more. That's part of doing what we do internally, but also being part of a community and ensuring that we help there. So I would say This is something all of us have to work on. This is nobody's individual job. This is collective. This is a place where the industry can come together and really have a significant impact. And it's going to require us to do that because all of our supply chains, the way our suppliers work, et cetera, we're also interlinked. None of us can solve this on our own. And that's what I'm excited about, is us coming together as an industry to really make a mark and do something special here to help our planet.
Agreed that the responsibility is certainly bigger than any one company, but keeping the focus on Clorox, are there some examples that you would point to of what you're most proud of in that ESG space?
Yeah, starting with people, we've been, again, hard at work on I&D for a number of years. And if you start to look at the representation that we have in our company, so our executive team, for example, is 46% women. We were 50%. We just made a great new promotion. So we're at 46% women on our executive team. Our board has been, from a representation perspective, best in class for a number of years from both a gender perspective and people of color. And we believe modeling at the top is incredibly important. People have to look at the positions that lead companies, and they have to be reflective of who they are, so that they can strive to do something that maybe they didn't think they could do in the past because they didn't see people who look like them in positions. So I'm really proud of that. I'm really proud of the footprint reduction we've already made. So we've reduced our greenhouse gas emissions by 56% since 2008, and that exceeded our target. We have already moved to 100% renewable electricity in US and Canada, well ahead of our 2025 goal. And then if you think about just product transparency, which we continue to push, we were the first major CPG to voluntarily disclose our ingredients on our cleaning and disinfecting products. And we're continuing to drive transparency across our categories. So I'm really proud of the impacts we've had to date. And I'm really proud of the goals we've set. That net zero goal at 2050 and what that's required, we feel great about that. Our signature goal of reducing packaging by 50%, so virgin fiber plastic packaging by 50% by 2030 is another place we can make a significant impact in a place where, our industry really has a responsibility given the fact that our products are used so frequently and packaging is disposed of so quickly.
A lot of impressive results. Thank you. You're a California-based company. Do you think that leads you to approach some of these issues more aggressively or differently, perhaps than others? Does it add a different sense of awareness for the company being in an area that tends to be more progressive on a lot of these issues?
I think it helped us in the early days see it clearly and be surrounded by people who saw it early, and so we had the benefit of that. What I would say now is I don't know if it matters where you're based. I'm hearing everyone talk about this, and so I do think it got us an early start. But I think really, as I look across people who are based everywhere around the world, people have that awareness. So I wouldn't say it's an advantage now. It just got us an early start. And I'm proud of that early start because it's led us to be bigger and bolder in our commitments recently.
You and I had the opportunity to see each other last week at an event that Consumer Brands put on. And before you got to that, you were also out on the road in your plants, meeting with people on the front lines, people who have worked their tails off for well over 20 months here. And it's remarkable what they've produced. What'd you hear from people on the ground?
Oh, I hope I don't get teary, Jeff. Didn't expect that question, but thank you for asking it. The best week of my tenure as CEO was spent last week with our people and our teams, seeing what they've done, hearing from them. The first takeaway I would have is just the incredible pride they have in what they have done during this time, that they've come to work, they've done it safely, and that they've helped people. I have people tell me stories of, they would stop by a store on their way home and they'd have their uniform on. And people would come up and thank them for their service to the country. What an incredible honor. And we're so proud of all the work they did. And then the second thing is, not just delivering products. I went in our facilities and saw the imaginative ways people did different things around innovation. We had a facility that said we could never get above a certain volume. That was the belief. And they've been able to radically break that barrier and get to a completely different volume, just challenging the status quo. And they did it all on their own. And so, that really heartens me. But the other thing I would just say is, people are tired generally. This is not just the people I visited, it's people around the world. And so I'm really cautious, and our team is really focused on how do we keep people motivated? How do we keep them continuing to focus on their safety, continuing to focus on their wellness during a time when we all have a bit of pandemic fatigue, maybe more than a bit, actually, Jeff.
That's great feedback, and I know people appreciate that, right? It's one thing, the perspectives we all gain in our corporate experiences, what we can do over Zoom and other platforms like this. It's completely different to speak with people on the front lines. And we all remember back to March and April, these were the heroes, right? These were the heroes that kept the shelves stocked, did everything they could, worked overtime. And at that point, they didn't know how much risk they may have been putting themselves at. So they really were the heroes. And now it gets complicated, right? We're 20 months later. In some of these environments, people have different attitudes about people perhaps who have chosen not to get vaccinated, or some of these issues. And we've lost our focus on just what heroes these individuals have been and continue to be to provide for 300+ million Americans every day.
Jeff, here to that. And I hope if anything is taken away from our time together, that people remember that. And let's ensure that we continue to put that human element forth in front. These people are still heroes. They're still doing above and beyond work to serve people in a time when they have higher demands than ever. And we have to remember that, and we have to have conversations with them and making sure that we're understanding their point of view as we move forward in things like vaccine mandates, et cetera.
Let's go back to some of the business dynamics. You mentioned before the acceleration of digital and how you're going to achieve some of your goals even before you thought you might have prior to the pandemic. One of the things we've heard is that digital isn't just the buying of the product via online. It's also the research that consumers are doing today. They're interacting in a way much different with products. What's your experience been on the digital side? What does that new consumer look like? And a question you've asked, what is it going to take to make it stick?
Absolutely. I think you're completely right. Digital, we knew was going to continue to be a mega trend long before the pandemic hit, and the pandemic just massively accelerated it. And it is in the way that people receive information, the way they interact with the world is more digital, clearly more digital now, just in having a meeting like this. And their expectations, because of that digital nature, are so much higher when it relates to speed. I placed an order yesterday for something to arrive, and I was horrified that it was going to take 5 hours to get to my door. I mean, I can't even imagine thinking that 5 years ago, but that's the expectation people have now. And what that means for our business, and I think for all of our businesses, that means we have to be faster, and digital is the way to get there. And we must ensure that we have the right processes that are digitally enabled. We have to speak to people in our brands in a digital manner. We spend about 2/3 of our marketing dollars today in digital marketing because of that. And then we need to figure out how to make that whole ecosystem work across the supply chain, because we can't do it individually. Again, as companies, we have to have visibility into everything that we do to be able to meet that consumer need of speed. And then, of course, information and trust building in that digital relationship. So for us, that meant we needed to accelerate our digital transformation. So we have put in place a $500 million transformation program. And this is intended to continue to accelerate our progress in e-commerce, accelerate our digital marketing capability, product development capability, and super importantly, our supply chain visibility, resiliency, and speed. And all of those will become foundational to meeting consumer needs as we move forward.
Stacey, does that vary across brands, or there must be a different digital emphasis on different brands? Some brands more attractive to the consumer from a digital standpoint, I would imagine, but you're the expert.
No, it is, we're talking to people digitally across all our brands. It is a way for us to connect with consumers that they are really receptive to. We started moving early into digital. I think we were a little earlier than many of our peer sets about investing heavily in digital. And we have just found that is about the right mix for us, is about 2/3 of the mix. And it varies a little from brand to brand, but not extreme.
Okay. Well, I'm going to close before we get to some of the audience questions with the same question to both of you. You're writing your book on your lessons of the pandemic. Now that you're an expert on all of these things, what are the 3 key themes? What are the things that struck you most in terms of the consumer, in terms of employees, in terms of business, the lessons learned?
I would say, Stacey, you can build or disagree with me on this, but I think I know where you're going to agree for sure. The first one is we're just human beings, and we're serving each other as people. And if you lose sight of that, if you lose sight of this is all just about people, that's where you start to make the wrong choices. And so it's a reminder to me every day as we make decisions, what is the real human and people impact of the choices we make, and not closing our eyes to that, because it can lead you only to good places if you follow people and what their needs are. So that's number one. Number two is complacency is the biggest enemy we have. And I think we can look back at choices we've made over the years as an industry, as a company, as an individual. And I think the pandemic has challenged a lot of that, whether that be our personal value set and how we work, whether that be choices we make in business, et cetera. And that is one thing that we will take away from us. Complacency is the enemy. And you have to be always moving forward, to Stacey's good point. And then the third thing is the value of collaboration. Again, I'll say, I don't think there's any problem that a company can solve on their own, or an individual can solve on their own. So the power of community, the power of coming together to solve big world problems is going to become more important than ever. This pandemic, we wouldn't have done it without our retailer partners, without our supplier partners, without all of the partners who make our ecosystem work. Our government partners, and we're so grateful to them. And that's going to continue to be an important theme as we move forward.
I just add one thing to Linda's, because I so wholeheartedly agree with the one she's given, which is the ability to have a clear-sighted goal and then to pivot on your way to get there. You just don't know what you're coming up against. So you need to know what you want to achieve. But the ability to pivot and change your way of getting there has been so critical to us through the pandemic. And we have had to react to so many things. And it is a muscle that I don't think I personally had at the degree I needed it. And I have certainly built that muscle much more under the pandemic.
Stacey, I think it's such a great point, right? You've got to be nimble in this environment. And this idea that any of us have the answers and we can kind of play out how this is going to go, we're kidding ourselves. So that is a great lesson. Let's turn to some of the questions we received from the audience. And Stacey, I'll start with you. The first question is about that marketing strategy for Clorox heading into 2022. A broad question about your marketing strategy. I'll let you take it.
Yeah, so our marketing strategy is what it has been under the pandemic, which is how can we really help people? Again, the pandemic isn't over, and people are facing new challenges that came out of the pandemic. Things like, how do I get enough value? Like, what brands can I turn to who give me value? I'm spending more time at home. So I think we're really focused on how can we help people as they're going on these journeys. I think what has changed the most is the acceleration of our marketing strategies and how quickly we've had to respond to what consumers need in the moment. So, for example, on the Hidden Valley, we were always obviously giving people ways to use Hidden Valley, but it became clear to us in the pandemic, people were cooking together as families and it was getting so monotonous. So we really started to do things like give people ways to engage their kids in the cooking experience with them. Those are the kinds of pivots we're trying to make, which is what do people really need and how can we be of most help to them in the moment? That's what our marketing has really been about for 2 years. And I don't think we're ever going back.
That's great. Linda, I'll turn to you. You guys launched some new programs targeting some new customers during the pandemic, something like the United Clean Plus program. It certainly seen the pandemic open up a whole new business line of opportunity. How are you thinking about those commercial opportunities going forward?
Yeah, we've always had a retail and a professional business, but what we realized were there were places where those two things came together that we weren't uniquely serving. Where a consumer is really, experiencing a business or brand in a different way, and they want the reassurance that something is clean and disinfected, for example. And that's what partnerships like United Airlines do for us. They allow us to talk to consumers in a way that reassure them, allow those businesses to reassure their consumers that things are clean, and it also helps reinforce the benefit of Clorox well beyond the traditional marketing campaigns that Stacey leads, or the products that they experience at home. So we continue to pursue those. We get a lot of inbound calls, and I think again it comes back to that point of we're thinking more holistically across industry and collaboration to how we keep people safe and well during this time. And so I expect that to continue to be a portion of our business moving forward.
I'm going to close with this question from the audience. What did you learn along the way to your path to getting to 50-50 gender balance within leadership? What could other CPG companies learn from you? I
think it really is about including people and making them feel valued for who they are. I heard many times early in my career from people, I don't know what to do with you. That was a phrase early because I was different than other people. I approached things differently. I'd break out into tears in a meeting, embarrassingly. I couldn't help myself. It was just who I was. And I think for us as a company, we learn to embrace people at where they are and who they are fully, and without caveat. And that really creating a culture where people can fully be themselves allows women and people of color and all forms of diversity to rise. I'm also an introvert. That wasn't that valued as a salesperson early in my career. But I was lucky enough to have people and lucky enough to be part of this company that people realized I was a great listener. And that I could do things differently. So I would encourage people, we absolutely need representation. We have to get that right. The only way we'll make that fully realized into the tremendous value that I think we get out of it, Clorox, is by helping people to be their full and authentic selves. And I am so grateful that I am part of a company that has done that for my tenure. And I'm grateful to work with people who all bring different things to the table, and they make me better, and they allow me to be myself. So how lucky am I?
I don't know what to do with you. Sounds like a badge of honor to me. And I think
I took it as a badge of honor, but no one says that anymore. And I'm really proud of that, because early in the career, you could say, well, what does that mean? But I think now nobody would say that, because they're looking for ways to help a person who is different blossom and grow. And I hope no one at our company ever has, and anyone asked that question, I don't know what to do with you, even though you're right, it was fuel for me. But that's not questions we should ask for people. It should be, gosh, you do something different, and how can I learn from that, and how can I get the best out of it?
Well, and that's the point. And you said it, to be your authentic self. We're not all in the boxes that we were once in, and we're going to be a lot more creative, a lot more dynamic as we go forward. I think I haven't been in this industry nearly as long as either of you, but I can't imagine a more exciting time to be in the industry. I can't imagine a more necessary time to bring in some diverse points of view, some different ways of doing things, people who aren't necessarily captive to what's worked for the CPG industry for many decades before. It's going to take some new thinking. I think you guys provided that today. So Linda and Stacey, thank you to both of you. We really appreciate you joining us today. I know the audience did as well. I want to thank Salesforce and Thomas Large and Singer for sponsoring, and our partners at the American Cleaning Institute as well. As I said at the outset, this is our final session for 2021. Keep an eye on our website for upcoming educational opportunities as we head into the new year. Happy holidays to everyone at Clorox, to everyone who joined us today. Thank you, and Happy New Year as well. Take care.
Thank you. Be well.
Thank you.